Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today's IG Live is called Yemen Under Siege, being punished for standing with Palestine or Philistine. So we're going to talk about three points. It's going to be the ongoing crisis in Yemen, the one that you don't hear about, how Yemen's solidarity with Palestine has made it a target, and what we can all do, what you can all do to support relief and justice. So my name is Jehan Hakim, and I am Yemeni-American. I'm a Bay Area native, and I'm also the founder of the Yemeni Alliance Committee. If you have not followed us, go ahead and go to the Yemeni Alliance Committee. I know it's a mouthful, but you can follow along to the work that we've been doing. We are a grassroots, community-based advocacy organization working to end foreign intervention, foreign involvement in Yemen, while we're nonpartisan as well, and we firmly stand on the sovereignty and Yemen's self-determination. And with me today, I have Dr. Aisha Jumaan, who's an epidemiologist, and she is the founder of YRRF, Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation. It's one of the very few, if not, I will even dare to say the only organization that we at the Yemeni Alliance Committee support, that we vouch for, who have direct access into Yemen, working with local partners and volunteers on the ground to deliver aid to hard to reach areas. And those who have been to Yemen know that not anyone can just enter Yemen and distribute aid. You know, if you are in the, if you have capacity to support Yemen financially, please donate to YRRF, and we can talk about how to support Yemen, you know, after this conversation. So before we dive into sort of what the current situation is right now in Yemen, I wanted to kind of give a short history as to what transpired before 2023, before you all heard of Yemen, because I know that many folks that I've spoken to have never heard of Yemen, except for maybe that one episode on the Friends show where I forgot who was going to Yemen supposedly in the airport, or else like nobody really knows where Yemen is, and that's a deliberate strategy to really erase what the West has been doing. So in 2015, under the Obama administration, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, in collusion or in collaboration with the US and the UK, launched airstrikes on Yemen, turning a civil war that was contained to a regional inferno, crushing Yemen's independence, and keeping the control of the Gulf and the West, crippling daily life, essentially. Alongside the airstrikes and the bombing campaign, there was also a blockade that was imposed, air, land, and sea, restricting the flow of food, water, medicine, aid into Yemen, and in a country that is heavily reliant on foreign aid. That was, not only was it a war crime, but it really turned Yemen's, you know, destructive climate into a famine. So folks were dying, Yemenis were dying from the violence, foreign and internal, and then also from hunger. And the toll, what the toll looks like, you'll find the numbers all over the place if you're going to Google. I think the UN still uses the old number of 50,000 or 60,000, and in reality, up to 400,000 Yemenis have been killed in between 2015 and 2022, and 2/3 of those deaths, or those murders rather, were due to airstrikes, and the rest were from the famine and disease. Because when water and aid and devastation is rampant in a society, then diseases that have been eradicated decades ago come back, like cholera, like diphtheria, things that, situations that the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation really have been working hard to, you know, do away with. So when we think about, so like, what does that have to do with us here in America? Like, that's happening over there to those people. I would encourage us to really move away from language like that, because over there, those peoples, obviously, there's racist connotations there, but it has everything to do with American taxpayers. Because if not for the U.S. fueling the Saudi-led coalition with arms, intelligence support, um, warplanes being serviced mid-air and refueled, then the coalition could not continue this war. So it has everything to do with us as taxpayers, especially those of us who have, since 2023, since October of 2023, have come into this era of consciousness. And I commend the American people that are standing up right now for Palestine, because they're finally realizing that the US is not only complicit, but it is an active player in this genocide. So in 2022, I think Yemen and the Gulf and the U.S. reached a stalemate. And then there was a UN brokered truce in April of 2022. And then finally, for the most part, airstrikes ended from the side of the Gulf. So there was sort of, and it's held up for the most part. The Gulf and Yemen have kind of squashed their beef. But that changed when October 7th happened. Obviously, the Yemeni people and Arabs and Muslims worldwide have been chanting and standing in solidarity with Palestine ever since the inception of Israel as a settler colonial state. Like, this is not a new idea. It's not a new form of solidarity. This is something that is in our blood. Those of us who grew up in families that are Arab and are Muslim, or people of conscience, even those who fought and stood back when Vietnam was being pummeled by the US, know that war is never the answer, and war is, in this day and age, it's about profit and power. So what happened was that Yemen fired drones and missiles, showing their solidarity for Palestine, even though they themselves are suffering from economic sanctions. And what's been happening since then is that the UK and the US and Israel have been bombing Yemen fiercely, I'm sorry. And there has been this never-ending era of violence that Yemen has been experiencing. And we hear that, get you a friend like Yemen. Yemen has nothing to lose, and I want to remind people that Yemen has a lot to lose, and it is losing a lot, and we will talk about that in a second here. But before I pass it all over to Dr. Aisha Jumaan, I just want to remind folks of the recent events. On August 28th of this year, 2025, Israel launched airstrikes on Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, and it striked Ahmed Ghalib, who is the prime minister of the Ansarullah run government. It's an official, an elected official. Also, several other ministers and top officials were killed. And if we are following international human rights laws, these are war crimes. No country or nation, established or otherwise, has the authority to eradicate or murder top officials, especially of a sovereign nation. And also yesterday, Israel conducted an airstrike on Gaza that killed Abu Ubaidah. So another war crime. So I just wanted to set the stage and just remind folks where we are, where we've been. And so Dr. Aisha Jumaan, can you please give us an update? Because Dr. Aisha just does travel to Yemen. And she was there recently, I want to say this year, right, Dr. Aisha?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you give us an update on the current situation in Yemen and what you're seeing on the ground?
Okay. First, thank you very much for arranging this session. And I also want to thank everybody who joined us today. And I hope that they will be supporters to end the atrocities that are committed both in Yemen and also in Palestine. So I went to Yemen in June of this year, and I stayed until August. I visited both Aden and Sana'a. And again, Yemen is a beautiful country that has a lot of tradition and a lot of history, but what was very challenging and very heartbreaking for me is because I go to Yemen every year. So to see the deterioration of the economic situation in Yemen. So I saw a lot more people, families actually, who are homeless. This is unheard of in Yemen. You never see a family that's homeless. The streets during very busy hours where it's very hard to move around were empty because a lot of the businesses had shuttered, or a lot of the businesses also don't have people who are frequenting them. As we know, and I'm not sure how many people know that, also the Yemeni civil servants, especially in the Sana'a government, have not received salaries since August of 2016, when the Saudi moved the central bank from Sana'a. So, and with the additional sanctions that the Trump administration and Biden before him had imposed on Yemen, there is really an economic strangulation of a country that has been experiencing the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, where 19 million people need humanitarian assistance. Add to that the huge reduction in international relief in Yemen. This year, they received probably less than 25% of what they need. So there's just really a huge economic strangulation of the country, and the people are feeling it. There are a lot of people who are hungry. And what also is not in the news and people don't recognize, that now there are pockets of famine in Yemen. There are 17 million people in Yemen today, based on reports that just came out by the UN last month, actually, that are food insecure in Yemen. So we have a huge problem. And again, I think what people need to recognize, this is a man-made crisis. This is something that can be lifted and stopped immediately if there is a decision to do so. On the contrary, what we see the West is doing, whether it's the US, whether it's the UK, and of course, Israel does not respect any international laws. As you just mentioned, they just bombed the Prime Minister's cabinet meeting, killing the Prime Minister and 8 of the ministers. We don't know how many others were injured. So there is a lot that is going on in Yemen. The Israelis have been hitting everything that is a civilian infrastructure. They have hit a gas station, one of the largest gas stations that has, it's a public one that has storage for petrol. They hit that. They've hit all the electricity grids and electrical stations in Sana'a. They've hit the main port for Hodeidah that brings in that imports in food and medicine and essential goods to Yemen. They've hit the port that imports fuel and gas to Yemen. So they've been really going after crippling Yemen and inducing famine and misery in Yemen. And we've seen what they've done in Gaza, and we've seen what they've done in Lebanon as well. And now they're also bombing Syria. So to think about it a little bit and to reflect of what the role of the US is, Israel cannot sustain and cannot financially afford the wars that had started and continue to wage in the Middle East, whether it's against Iran or Lebanon or Syria or Yemen and Gaza. All of this requires a lot of money, and all of this is sustained by the US. And the complicity of the Western media and the US media that always whitewashes Israel's crimes and genocide in Yemen and in Gaza and everywhere else.
Thank you so much. If you're just tuning in, this is the IG Live titled Yemen Under Siege, Yemen being targeted for standing with Palestine. We were unable to go live through the Yemeni Alliance Committee, so please tune in here and share. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the comments and I'll do my best to ask. Dr. Aisha, I talked earlier about how we hear all over social media that go Yemen, get you a friend like Yemen. Yemen has nothing to lose. But the truth is that Yemen is losing everything: homes, lives, livelihoods, while still being sanctioned themselves. So, can you speak to this reality?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that really hurts me whenever I hear people saying, oh, Yemen has nothing to lose. And this, you see this very common in Western media as well. Yemen, as you mentioned, was under heavy airstrikes on a daily basis from 2015 up to May 2022. Yemen was also under siege by the Saudi-led coalition, supported by the US also for those many years and even more. Even and when they were under siege and they were being bombed on every single day for 8 years, the Yemeni never tried to prevent ships from crossing Bab el-Mandeb in the Red Sea. When they were suffering themselves, they let ships go through. It's only when Gaza is being genocided by Israel, it's only when Gaza is being starved by Israel, that the Yemeni have decided that they are going to do something about it. And that something was to not allow Israeli ships to pass through Bab el-Mandeb until they stop their attacks on Gaza. They actually stopped when there were two very brief ceasefires. So, as I mentioned earlier, Yemen has, been by the Biden administration, by the way, with the UK and several other European countries. Yemen, and that occurred during the Biden administration. Yemen then was subjected to heavy airstrikes by the Trump administration, where the majority of the strikes were on civilian structure. And when they hit the port, the main port for imports of fuel, they actually said, we just want to cripple the economy. It was not a military site whatsoever. And so, on top of that, so you have the Biden administration with many European countries, you have the Trump administration bombing Yemen extensively, and that we also have Israel bombing Yemen as well. So you have, the majority of so-called Western democratic countries upholding genocide and supporting a genocidal state against the only country in the whole wide world that is trying to stop genocide. I mean, this is the charter of the UN. The League of Nations was dismantled because it couldn't stop, the World War II. Now we have Yemen, and they established the UN. The UN hasn't done anything to stop the genocide in Gaza. It hasn't done anything to stop the famine in Gaza. Yet Yemen, the only country, the one that is suffering from starvation, the one that's suffering from airstrikes, daily airstrikes now, they're the ones who decided, no, we're not going to allow this to happen. And so instead of the whole world going to support Yemen on this and say, yes, you are upholding international law, Yemen is being punished for with the United Nations Charter and all the Geneva Convention and the Italy Convention. All of these conventions say that when genocide has happened, we have to stop it. And Yemen is stopping it at a huge cost. And the latest, like we just mentioned, is the Prime Minister's office, a cabinet, when they had a meeting, which is again against international law. They targeted, civilian, these are civilian people. They're not military people. They had their weekly meeting, and that's when they bombed them. And they, again, we don't know what the total number is, but so far we know the prime minister was martyred and 8 other ministers were martyred in the process. So again, Israel should be held accountable, and Yemenis are paying a heavy price. And I just also need to tell you that despite all of this, all the bombing by the US, by the UK, by the Israelis, by everybody else who is refusing not just to stop genocide, are punishing the Yemeni people are out every single Friday to protest the genocide and the starvation of the people in Gaza.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yes, I know we've seen rallies in the thousands and in the millions every Friday, despite the bombing, despite a collapsed infrastructure, despite the disease and the famine. Yemenis walking shoulder to shoulder, rallying for a free Palestine. So I think that that's commendable, despite what they are experiencing themselves. Like I don't know any other country or community that has stood on business in this way.
Can I add something to this, Jehan? And that is, what Yemenis know what it means to be hungry because they've been starved. Yemen was almost declared a famine state when the Saudi-led coalition, with support of the U.S., was bombing them, and they were under siege. They know what it is to be bombed. So taking this position, it's not like they didn't know what was going to happen. They've been subjected to that. And they know the pain that comes with that. They know the price that comes with that. And yet they decided that it's, their obligation, their moral obligation is to try and end a genocide and starvation of the people in Gaza.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. You know that we have been doing this work together, and I forgot to mention it in your bio that we are also friends. We're comrades and friends in this work, in this anti-war, anti-colonial, anti-imperial work. It's a very tough space to be in. And so we know that since we've been fighting against foreign intervention, foreign involvement on Yemen, that Yemen is the forgotten war, So my question for you is, and it's something that I hear from other comrades in the anti-war space that don't really know too much about Yemen, is why do you think Yemen receives so little media coverage compared to other conflicts? And the other conflict, I'm not talking about Palestine. Let me just remind the viewers that this is not, the purpose of this is not to take away the highlight or the spotlight from what's happening in Palestine. We know that our liberation is bound, like our struggle is one. This is merely just to highlight something that has been forgotten or intentionally or deliberately dismissed. Is that Yemen is the only country that is standing up for Palestine, but it's being targeted. So why does the world not know about Yemen, in your opinion, Dr. Aisha?
Again, I will go back to the mainstream media. They will not cover anything that exposes the hypocrisy of the U.S. government and Western countries. I don't call Yemen a forgotten war, but actually I call it the purposefully blacked out war. It is purposely being blacked out because they don't want people to know. As you said, the Saudi-led coalition war on Yemen started under the Obama administration and had been supported since Obama. I mean, that's really crazy. It's over 10 years now, and every single US administration, UK administration had supported that. So they don't want to expose the atrocities that are being committed against Yemen. I'll compare that to the Ukraine war that received so much attention and vilification of Russia. We don't see any of that, but both when it comes to Yemen and when it comes to Gaza, because the perpetrator, the culprit in both Yemen and Gaza are friends of the US, and the US is actively supporting that. So when I came to this country many, many years ago, I was only 17, I would watch the news, and people always said how the US has free media. And having come from Yemen, we always want to know who owns the media source we're reading, because we want to know, if they're biased or not. I never thought the US had free media, because when I saw the coverage that pertained to the Middle East, I knew it was completely biased. And so I will actually try to go, find out who owns ABC and who owns NBC and who owns CNN. Because once you figure out who owns these, outlets, who owns the New York Times, you realize that they're not biased. I remember a friend telling me, he said when he was first hired in a very prominent newspaper to be the editor, he said he wrote his first piece and published it. And the owner called him and he said, I hired you to write my opinion, not write yours. So that's very powerful. I think people need to recognize that the reason they don't get to know about the atrocities that are happening by US support and Western support is being covered up. And they need to find alternative sources for the media. And thank God we are, now have these social media outlets where we get to know what's happening. Without the social media outlets, we wouldn't know what's happening in Gaza.
Right.
It's really not the mainstream media that's telling us about the atrocities, about the genocide, about the starvation in Gaza. It's social media.
Right.
And we have seen that Israel had killed over 200 Palestinian journalists. They don't want the truth to come out. And so we have the same thing. I'll also use another example. I just wrote a piece coming out of Yemen. They say Yemen is paying a heavy price for this. Nobody wants to publish it. So it's a purposely blacked out war. They don't want you to know because they don't want you to get angry at who is doing this
Right.
and try to change it.
Because telling the truth about Yemen would expose the role of Western powers because
Absolutely.
they are creating and sustaining this crisis, or the one in Gaza and in other places such as the Congo, the Sudan. I mean, there's not a place in the globe right now that is not being impacted by Western policies or Western involvement and profit, because it's war is a racket. So um, thank you for reminding us that media silence protects the empire, sadly. So I highly encourage folks to follow people that are directly impacted by crises, as opposed to mainstream media, because we do live in an era where there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of bought and sold opinions, but social media is, it can be a black hole. So, do your research and verify. But if you follow the Yemeni Alliance community, you'll get real news about Yemen. Dr. Aisha, thank you so much for your time. I wanted to ask you that, despite everything, Yemenis are continuing to show resilience, and I want to just really quickly kind of humanize, and I hate that word as well, because in the effort of humanizing our people, it feels dehumanizing. Because why do we need to even, validate that? But when you've seen Yemenis recently, um, what kind of examples are you seeing of how communities are surviving, they're organizing, and how they're resisting despite the airstrikes, the famine, lack of aid, and then nobody's listening to Yemen as well. That's the like I this is like a not a trifecta. Is there a fourfecta? You know what I mean? Like there's like every angle Yemen is being blacked out from. Like they're not, even lefties who are, anti-war are still not able to see Yemen's humanity, because Yemenis are not robots. They're not AI. They're not some kind of super intelligence. They are human beings that feel hungry and pain, and just like you and I, just like anyone else, right? So they're not superhumans. So how are you seeing Yemenis on the ground really deal with this?
So again, because Yemen values the community, that has really helped quite a bit. You see, for example, restaurants telling people if you're hungry and you can't pay, you can have a meal and leave, which is really quite, very heartwarming to see that. Many people have they put in clean food in front of their homes in a hanger. Many homes have hangars now in front of their homes where they put in free, clean food, so people who are hungry and pass by can see it. You have people who, again, despite, I also need to say that there are about 5 million people in Yemen who are internally displaced. And we don't see a lot of the tents that you see in other places where, the people who are internally displaced are living, because many other are absorbed by either extended family members or neighbors or friends. So there is that community support. You see, which is really, I was very impressed by this as well. You see a lot of women now owning their own businesses. So they've lost, their husbands or their sons or whoever was the income generating person in the house. And so they have bakeries, they do catering from their homes. They're out in the streets. They will have a thermos of coffee and they will be selling you coffee in the street. So it's, again, I was very, very impressed with how many women businesses have sprung up. And we also support women businesses through Yemen Relief. Because, whether it's bakeries, whether it's animal husbandries, we just feel we need to support them. The other thing which you spoke to and I also mentioned is that the millions of people who, and every single Friday, rain or hot, they are out there chanting for Palestine, chanting for Gaza. I mean, every single Friday. And being there is very different, because one is that a lot of the streets need to be blocked, because so that area where they, especially in Sana'a, because that's where I was, they, from the morning, that impacts the population because you can no longer move very freely. But nobody is complaining about it. I think if we do that in the US, the neighbors and everybody will be, making a light about it. That gathering every single Friday for almost 2 years now by millions of people, and it's not just in Sana'a, it's in every single governorate in Yemen. Millions of people are out showing defiance. And there were times under the Biden administration and under the Trump administration where they bombed the perimeters of where people are gathered, and they did not move from their places. They stayed there. They believe in the cause. They believe in the cause. They feel it's an obligation to do this. And again, international law, whether through the Geneva Convention, whether through the Rome Convention, whether it's, in the UN Charter, this is what every single country should be doing. And the Yemenis have decided to take it upon themselves. And again, I need to repeat this. These people do it when they know they are going to be even hungrier than before, and they have experienced hunger. When they know they are going to be bombed in their homes, because they have been bombed in their homes for 8 years straight. They know all of this, and they yet decide to do it. Yemen, especially the Sana'a government, had been offered so many perks to stop supporting Gaza. They've been giving so many ways to get out of this, and we will give you money, we will give you, power, we will give you, and they have said no to all of that. They're refusing all of that. That will make life, very comfortable. But they're saying, no, our obligation is to stop genocide. It's not, we're not doing this, so we will be bribed into not doing it. We're doing this because we believe in that we have to do this.
Yeah, solidarity comes with a price. So, and Yemenis are paying the ultimate price. So if you're tuning in, this is the IG Live called Yemen Under Siege, Yemenis being a target for their solidarity with Palestine. Unfortunately, the Yemeni Alliance Committee is oftentimes shadow banned, so we were unable to stream from our actual page. But if you're watching, please go to the Yemeni Alliance Committee on IG, and there you'll find this stream and other opportunities for you to advocate and plug into the movement. So my last question for you, and this is something that someone asked in the comments as well, is that how can we make sure that Yemen is not forgotten? What do people outside of Yemen, those of us in the States or in Western states, what can we do to help Yemen?
Thank you for asking that. This is extremely important. I think advocacy is one of the major issues we need to do. Like you said, Jehan, not a lot of people know what's going on in Yemen. We need to educate our neighbors. We need to educate our friends. We need to educate our families. Write about Yemen. Tweet about Yemen. Write on your Facebook about Yemen. Get resources from Yemeni Alliance Committee, and spread that information. That is extremely important. So what's happening to Yemen is not being blacked out. The second thing that you can do, especially in Western states and the US, contact your representative, contact your senators, and tell them this is not acceptable. We need to stop bombing Yemen. We need to stop enabling Israel to continue to bomb Yemen. We need to stop the sanctions on Yemen. The Yemenis, if the sanctions are removed, if they're not being bombed, they're very resilient people. They're going to, help themselves and support themselves, and then they will not need aid. But right now, we need all of that to stop. So please do that. Politicians need to hear from us. We voted them into their offices. So we need to show power that we need to stop that. So that's one thing we can do. Another one is support Yemeni organizations that are working on the ground. And I'm going to do a plug-in for Yemen Relief. We are a volunteer organization. All our people, whether in the US or in Yemen, are volunteers because we believe every single dollar that comes to us needs to go to someone who is in need in Yemen. And even $1 goes a long way in Yemen. So this is an organization where is 100% of your donation is going to be going to people in need. We work in all of Yemen, all Yemeni governorates. We have volunteers in all those places. We have a very strict criteria for who gets aid. We visit the families. We ensure that they actually do need the help. And that's where we do the help. We have projects, like I said, in income generation, because we need to support people support themselves. We do health projects, we do food projects because of the food insecurity. We support over 600 orphans on a monthly basis because otherwise these orphans and whoever is taking care of them will be in the streets. So these are, please visit our website, it's yemenfoundation.org, and check what we do. We have quarterly reports and we have annual reports. And there you will find all the information. If you're interested in any of those special projects, let us know. And again, we promise you that 100% of your donation will go to those in need.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aisha. So to sum it up, how you can help Yemen if you're outside of Yemen is to advocate. So contact your lawmakers. If you go to the Yemeni Alliance Committee profile, they're in our bio, there's a toolkit there. So there's a script, there are phone numbers, there are graphics, just to make it easier, because I know the political jargon can be confusing. So you can use our material, you can DM us if you need help, and use your social media platforms to advocate for Yemen. Even a simple hashtag as #Yemen can, bring up the attention or the awareness around Yemen. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the things, all the platforms. Another one was donate, because like we said that Dr. Aisha mentioned that there are pockets of Yemen that are experiencing famine. And I think when we say famine, I don't know if we understand the gravity of that. That these are people that do not know if they're going to eat. Like imagine what you feel like when you wake up from a long night of sleep and you wake up hungry. All of us feel that way, right? But imagine waking up and not knowing if you'll be able to eat for days at a time. That is a slow it's suffering and it's a slow death. Like dying from hunger is not something that you fall asleep and you don't wake up the next day. There are stages of it, and it's very, it's very painful. Donate, like Dr. Aisha said, to yemenfoundation.org, or you can find them on Instagram as well. Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation. They're tagged here. Um, and lastly, I wanted to mention that I encourage everyone to follow Yemeni-led initiatives, especially grassroots voices. You know, stay engaged by amplifying Yemen in addition to all the other causes. And there's so much going on in the world. So all we're suggesting and asking is for you to also add in Yemen into all the advocacy that you're already doing, not just when it's trending, because we know that Yemen hasn't trended for a really long time, if at all, because we know that solidarity, it's a practice, right? It's not just a moment. So please follow the Yemeni Alliance Committee and Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, and we appreciate you for tuning in. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Take care. Khalta Aisha. Ma salama.
Ma salama. Thank you.